Excuse me. David Carter's voice is steady, but there's a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. He holds out his boarding pass, first class, seat 2A. Megan Stone barely glances at it before plastering on a thin smile. Sir, this line is reserved for first-class passengers. David exhales slowly. I am a first-class passenger. Her smile tightens. I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. A beat of silence. Nearby passengers shift uncomfortably. Is there a problem? David asks, his voice calm but firm. Megan's gaze flickers with something unreadable. I just need to verify. Megan's lips curve into a polite yet hollow expression. I understand, sir, but I need to confirm your ticket. David notices how her tone shifts. Controlled, yet laced with condescension. She isn't asking, she's assuming. It's right in front of you, he states evenly. Megan doesn't move. Instead, she lets out a small sigh, the kind meant to seem patient. If you could just step aside while I check. David doesn't move either. Why? You didn't check his. He nods toward the man who just breezed past. A hush spreads. People begin to notice. Some glance away, unwilling to acknowledge the moment. Others smirk, their expressions unreadable, but complicit. David feels the weight of judgment pressing against him. He's been here before. This silent trial where he is both defendant and prosecution. A woman leans toward her companion, whispering something, eyes flicking between David and Megan. Sir, please step aside, Megan says again, sharper this time. David's grip tightens around his ticket. Or what? His voice remains controlled, but the challenge is clear. Megan exhales loudly, finally taking his ticket. A quick glance, barely a second, before she shakes her head. This must be a mistake. David's stomach twists. He knows what's coming. Excuse me? His voice is measured, but his pulse thrums beneath his skin. Megan tilts her head, voice carrying just enough volume to be heard. It's just, this ticket doesn't seem right. Someone scoffs from behind. Check it again, David says. Megan waves it dismissively. Sir, I need to verify that this wasn't issued in error. Error. A word that means fraud without saying it. David meets her gaze. Or do you need to verify that I belong? Before Megan can respond, a white businessman steps forward, boarding pass in hand. First class, he says with a distracted smile. Megan barely looks at his ticket before beaming. Welcome aboard, Mr. Reynolds. No hesitation, no verification. David watches the exchange, his jaw tightening. The contrast is blatant, undeniable. Mr. Reynolds doesn't even notice. Why would he? Privilege isn't something you feel when you have it. David exhales slowly. So, it's just me who needs verification. Megan's expression falters. Sir, I'm just following protocol. David smiles, cold, knowing. Whose protocol? Instead of answering, Megan reaches for the intercom. Security to gate 12, please. A ripple of murmurs spreads through the crowd. David doesn't move, doesn't flinch. He's seen this before, this quiet escalation, this shifting of the narrative where he becomes the problem. A uniformed guard approaches. What seems to be the issue? Megan gestures toward David. He's refusing to cooperate. David lets the words settle before speaking. Ma'am, I suggest you double-check my credentials. A challenge, a warning. And for the first time, Megan hesitates. David, the car's here. David Carter checks his watch. Right on time. His morning has been a series of precision moves, suit pressed, documents reviewed, mind focused. Today is a big day. A high-stakes meeting with the CEO of Skyline Airlines, where billions are on the table. He's prepared, as always. Composure is second nature. Sliding his laptop into his briefcase, he nods to his assistant. Let's go. In his world, excellence isn't optional. It's expected. But even that won't shield him from what's coming. Deals and contracts keep the firm running, but that's not what drives him. David's name carries weight in civil rights law. He's the man corporations fear when discrimination cases land on their desks. His victories have forced policy changes, shut down predatory businesses, and cost companies millions in settlements. And yet, despite all he's done, he still faces the same barriers he fights to dismantle. He adjusts his tie, pushing the thought away. Today, he's not here to battle injustice, but injustice doesn't wait for permission. David's path was never easy. Harvard didn't come with a free pass. Even with top grades, he was always the outsider, the one mistaken for a staff member at networking events, the intern at board meetings. "You're so articulate," they'd say, as if intelligence was unexpected. While colleagues climbed effortlessly, he had to prove himself twice as much for half the recognition. Every case, every deal, every victory, none of it erased the quiet doubts in their eyes. He learned early. Success didn't mean acceptance. And today, despite everything he's built, that lesson is about to repeat itself. Some days, it's subtle. The receptionist who greets others warmly but asks for his ID twice. The raised eyebrows when he walks into a luxury store. Other times, it's louder, like the investor who assumed he was the junior associate, not the lead counsel, or the journalist who called him an exception to the rule. David ignores it, moves past it, but it never disappears. And as his car pulls up to the airport, he knows today won't be any different. David steps out, grabbing his briefcase. He's faced senators in courtrooms, CEOs in boardrooms. Yet, no matter how high he climbs, the same question follows him. Do you really belong? He exhales, pushing the thought aside. First-class ticket in hand, he heads to the terminal. And right into a storm. David barely moves, as Megan's icy stare lingers on him. Her tone, clipped and impatient, feels worlds apart from the warmth she just displayed seconds ago. "Oh, Mr. Callahan, welcome aboard. I see you're heading to Paris. What a lovely trip," she gushed, handing a white businessman his boarding pass with a dazzling smile. But when she turns back to David, the warmth vanishes. Her lips press into a thin line. "Sir, I need you to step aside." The businessman glances at David, then back at Megan, sensing the shift. A brief hesitation, then he walks on without a second thought. David exhales slowly. He's seen this play before, but today he refuses to be written out of it. Megan taps her fingers against the counter, impatience flickering in her eyes. "I don't have time for this," she mutters, flipping through a stack of papers as though his existence is an administrative error. David remains still, his voice steady. "My ticket's first-class ticket. The name on it matches my ID. I belong here." Her sigh is exaggerated, meant to show the passengers behind him that he's somehow causing a scene. "Sir, I need you to move. You're holding up the line." "No, I'm not," he replies evenly. A murmur ripples through the waiting passengers. Some steal glances, others look away. Megan's fingers tighten around the ticket. This isn't about policy, it never was. Jason watches the exchange, his stomach nodding. He knows Megan well. Knows her tone when she's actually enforcing rules versus when she's doing this. He clears his throat. "Megan, maybe just..." Her glare cuts him off, the kind that says, "Stay out of this." He shifts uncomfortably. Challenging her could cost him. A reprimand may be worse, but watching David, standing firm under her scrutiny, makes Jason hesitate. His gaze flickers to the other passengers. Most pretend not to notice. A few smirk. He hates this. The silent agreement that comes with looking away. His hands tighten into fists at his sides. He wants to say something. He should say something. But he doesn't. Megan exhales sharply, her patience snapping. "Fine," she says, lifting the ticket between her fingers like it's counterfeit. "If you really belong here, prove it." David doesn't flinch. "I already did," he says, his voice controlled. She scoffs. "Then why does this feel off?" There it is, the accusation beneath the surface, the disbelief wrapped in a smug challenge. Passengers shift uncomfortably. A woman in line whispers to her companion. A man shakes his head like he's seen this before. David doesn't look away. "Scan the ticket," he says calmly. Megan hesitates, because if she does and he's right, she loses. and something tells David she hates to lose. David feels the weight of watching eyes. The tension is thick, expectant. Every fiber of his wants to push back, demanding respect, but he knows the game. One wrong move and suddenly he's angry. Aggressive, so he exhales, steadies his voice. "Go ahead, Megan. Scan it." Because in this moment, calm is his sharpest weapon. Megan's voice slices through the air, loud and sharp. "Sir, we take fraud very seriously." The word lingers, heavy, deliberate. Heads turn. Conversations pause. "You can't just buy a fake ticket and expect to get away with it," she continues, holding David's boarding pass up like evidence in a courtroom. A few gasps ripple through the crowd. Someone mutters, "Unbelievable." A man near the gate shakes his head, watching with thinly veiled amusement. David exhales slowly. His grip tightens around his briefcase. "My ticket is legitimate." "Check the system," he says, keeping his voice steady. Megan smirks. "Oh, we will." Her fingers dance over the keyboard, but the exaggerated theatrics tell him she's not searching for the truth. She's building a show. A moment later, her dramatic sigh fills the space. "Just as I thought, there's an issue with your reservation." Security is already on its way. David glances around, meeting the indifferent stares of passengers eager for entertainment. Here we go. The uniformed officers appear, their presence shifting the energy in the room. "Is there a problem?" one of them asks, scanning the scene. Megan doesn't miss a beat. "Yes, this man tried to board with fraudulent credentials." David meets the officer's gaze. "I paid for my seat. Look up my name." The officer hesitates, but Megan folds her arms, unshaken. "That won't be necessary. I've already checked. He's not in the system." A woman in line whispers, "Wow, this is embarrassing." A teenager nearby angles his phone, recording. David's heartbeat pounds, but his expression remains unreadable. He's been here before, in courtrooms where words held power. But here, perception outweighs truth. Another officer steps forward, hand grazing his radio. "Sir, we're going to have to ask you to come with us." David doesn't move, not yet. Among the onlookers, an elderly black woman watches. She doesn't speak, doesn't intervene, but her expression says everything. She's seen this before. Different decade, same injustice. A businessman in a tailored suit adjusts his cufflinks, avoiding eye contact. A young woman shifts uncomfortably but stays silent. No one steps forward. David scans the faces, searching for a sign of solidarity. Instead, he finds apathy, curiosity, maybe even satisfaction. He exhales slowly. A deep voice murmurs behind him. "Messed up, man." David turns slightly, catching the eye of a younger black traveler. He nods but doesn't speak. Because in moments like these, words don't fix what's already broken. David steadies his breath. He wants to shout, to call out the absurdity, but he knows how this plays out. One sharp tone, one raised voice, he becomes the problem. The officer's grip tightens near his belt. A warning. Megan smirks. She's already won in her mind. "Sir," the officer repeats, voice firmer, "let's not make this difficult." Difficult. The word stings, as if he's the disruption. As if standing his ground is the issue, not the blatant profiling unraveling before them. David clenches his jaw. "I'm not moving unless you verify my reservation." Megan scoffs. "You people always think you can talk your way out of consequences." The officer shifts uncomfortably. A murmur spreads through the crowd. Megan's words had weight, too much weight. David inhales deeply, forcing his composure to hold. Not yet, but soon. David reaches into his pocket, slowly, deliberately. The officer's tense, but what he pulls out isn't a weapon. It's his work ID. The embossed logo reads, Senior Legal Counsel, International Aviation Law. He meets the lead officer's gaze. "I need you to call your supervisor now." Megan falters. "What? Your supervisor?" His voice doesn't rise, but the authority in it shifts the air. Passengers murmur. A flicker of doubt crosses the officer's face. Megan hesitates. For the first time, uncertainty creeps into her features. David tilts his head slightly. Unless, of course, you'd like to explain why you falsely accused a corporate attorney in front of dozens of witnesses, on camera. The power is shifting, but the fight is far from over. Megan's smirk fades as her eyes lock onto the ID. The embossed letters seem to glow under the terminal lights. David Carter, legal advisor. Airline name. Jason, the younger security officer, lets out a quiet gasp. His grip on his radio loosens. David tilts his head slightly. Recognize the name? His voice is controlled, but the shift in power is undeniable. Passengers lean in, sensing the unraveling of the spectacle. The once amused expressions now hold curiosity and something else. A shift in belief. Megan swallows. That doesn't what? David interjects smoothly. Change the fact that you fabricated a charge, publicly humiliated a paying customer. A teenager who had been filming mutters, "Oh, this is getting good." Megan straightens, forcing a calm tone. There must be some mistake. David exhales, slow and deliberate. I agree, and it's about to be corrected. He pulls out his phone. The terminal holds its breath. The first ring is met with silence. The second sends a ripple through the crowd. Anticipation thick in the air. By the third, Megan shifts her weight, her earlier confidence crumbling. Then, a crisp, authoritative voice answers. Lisa Davenport, speaking. David doesn't waste time. We have a situation at Gate 14. A staff member made a serious misjudgment, and I'd like it addressed immediately. Megan's mouth parts, but she stays silent. Within minutes, the rhythmic click of heels echoes through the terminal. Lisa Davenport, the airline's regional manager, steps into view. Her sharp gaze scans the scene, pausing on Megan, then David. Someone wants to explain why my legal advisor was just accused of fraud. The terminal is dead silent. Lisa listens, arms crossed, as David recounts the past 10 minutes. With every word, Megan's face drains of color. She had built a spectacle, thrived in the power it gave her. But now, the weight of reality crashes down. Jason, the young officer, steps back. The other guards hesitate, exchanging uneasy glances. Lisa's expression is unreadable. You accused my legal advisor of fraud, publicly, without verifying a thing. Megan opens her mouth, but Lisa holds up a hand. And then security was called without proper cause. You do realize what this looks like, right? Passengers shift, murmuring. Some nod in agreement, others whisper, about time someone held her accountable. David remains composed, watching Megan squirm. Lisa exhales sharply. Megan, tell me, why did you assume his ticket was fake? Megan stares at the floor, because there's no right answer. I was just doing my job, Megan stammers, voice quieter than before. Lisa raises an eyebrow. Your job? Megan clears her throat. His name, it wasn't coming up in the system. And instead of troubleshooting, you jumped to fraud? Passengers exchange glances, the tension thick. Someone chuckles under their breath. Megan shifts uncomfortably. It wasn't personal. Lisa's lips press into a thin line. Not personal? You accused a high-level legal professional without evidence and tried to have security remove him. David watches as Megan's breathing turns shallow. The silence stretches. Then Lisa sighs. You should have stopped the moment he asked for verification. Megan's fingers tremble at her sides. The walls are closing in. Lisa's voice is calm but unyielding. You weren't doing your job. You were abusing your authority, humiliating a VIP client and violating company policies. The words land like a gavel, striking a bench. Megan's throat bobs as she swallows hard. I didn't mean to. Lisa doesn't let her finish. Intent doesn't erase impact. Passengers nod, some whisper finally. David doesn't move, doesn't gloat, he simply waits. Lisa's gaze hardens. We'll discuss your future with this company shortly. Megan's breath catches. This isn't just embarrassment anymore. This is the beginning of the end. And David, he's only getting started. Megan's breath comes in sharp gasps. Her hands tremble as she takes a step forward. This was a misunderstanding. Her voice cracks, desperation laced in every word. The crowd doesn't buy it. The murmurs grow louder, disbelief, frustration, anger. Jason, the younger security officer, shifts uncomfortably. He had followed her lead, but now the truth is laid bare. David remains composed, watching her unravel. A misunderstanding? His voice is quiet but firm. You saw my name, you ignored my proof, and you called security before even considering you could be wrong. Megan shakes her head frantically. I didn't mean... A woman in the crowd scoffs. You never do until you get caught. Megan's confidence crumbles, but it's too late. Lisa's expression is unreadable as she turns to David. Mr. Carter, I assure you, this will be dealt with immediately. Then she looks at Megan. The authority in her voice is absolute. Hand over your badge. Effective immediately, you are suspended. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Megan stiffens. Wait, no, please. Lisa doesn't waver. Your actions put this company at risk. This isn't up for debate. Jason swallows hard, stepping back, distancing himself from the fallout. David doesn't smirk, doesn't gloat. He simply waits, his silence heavier than any words. Megan hesitates, but under Lisa's piercing gaze, she finally unclips her badge with shaking fingers. It drops into Lisa's hand like a verdict sealed in stone. The whispers swell. Justice is unfolding in real time. Then a sound. Soft at first, a single clap, then another, and another. Within seconds, the terminal erupts in applause. The elderly black woman, who had been silent throughout the ordeal, gives a slow, approving nod. It's about time, she murmurs. David exhales, the weight of the moment settling over him. This isn't just about him. It never was. For every person who had been dismissed, humiliated, and told they didn't belong, this was a reckoning. Megan, red-faced, looks around. The crowd isn't just reacting to her punishment, they're celebrating something bigger. For the first time, she feels truly small. Lisa clears her throat, regaining control. Let's move forward. But David isn't finished yet. Not quite. Megan stares at him, eyes pleading. I wasn't trying to be... David raises a hand, silencing her. His voice remains calm, but the edge is unmistakable. Privilege made you assume I didn't belong. Megan flinches. Reality just proved otherwise. His words hang in the air, cutting deeper than any reprimand. The terminal is silent. Because at that moment the truth was undeniable, and Megan knows it. Lisa turns back to David. On behalf of this airline, I sincerely apologize. David nods, ever professional. Ensure this never happens again. As he boards first class, the applause follows him. Not just for his personal victory, but for the undeniable truth that today, for once, justice actually won. David leans back in his seat, exhaling slowly. His gaze lingers on the clouds outside, a quiet but knowing smile forming. A small victory, one step forward in a much larger fight. How often do you think this happens? The invitation is clear. This isn't just David's story, it's a reality many face. The comment section awaits. A voiceover cuts through the silence. Racism isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a glance, a policy, an assumption. It's time we talk about it. The weight of the message lingers. The screen darkens, and a final message appears. Like, share, and subscribe. Stories like these need to be told. The conversation must continue. The fight isn't over.